my yarny friends. I'm Sara Sach, and today is Friday Fun Day, and I have a really fun project for you. You notice I have my lucky shirt on today. Well, what I have for you today is we're going to make some cute 4-leaf clover squares and turn them into this adorable hot pad or pot holder. Isn't that adorable? Now you'll have to make 8 of these 4-inch squares, and it's going to give you a little over 8-inch by 8-inch hot pad. Now I do want to remind you that even though it's double, you use 8 squares, we do have holes in it. So don't use this to take something hot out of the stove or out of the oven or off the stove. This is basically used like a trivet that you can set something hot on to protect your wood or counter surfaces. But also it makes a great decoration to make these and put them up in your kitchen. Now I did design these little squares to look like 4-leaf clovers, but you can do them in bright colors and they'll look like flowers. So you can do this with your leftover cotton scraps. Also, I did this completely out of cotton yarns, but if you're going to use this for decoration, because you can put these squares and make a table runner, a tablecloth, put them on a hat, use them as just individual coasters. Lots of different things that you can use these cute 4-leaf clover squares for, like maybe a long scarf. So lots of uses, lots of fun, and I think you're really going to enjoy this. To make our 4-leaf clover little squares and make them into a hot pad, you're actually going to need 8 squares. We'll be making 8, we'll put 4 together, and then we'll put those that are in 2 big squares together to form a double thick hot pad or pot holder. All right, and so what I used was 100% cotton yarns. A green, a white, and an orange. Now I chose these colors, but you can of course make them in any shades of green and any colors that you want to. I just thought it would be fun for a St. Patrick's Day party. Now remember, you can use these as coasters. You can use them as appliques. You can make this into a table runner, a bag, a scarf, a hat, anything that you want to. The squares themselves measure approximately 4 inches. Okay, you're going to need about 2 ounces of each of your 3 colors that you're choosing. Now, I pulled this out of my stash, and so these are just the colors that I had on hand. All 100% cotton. Now also remember, these are medium weight number 4, and if you're going to use it for something else, you don't have to make it out of cotton. You can use whatever fibers that you want to. Acrylic or wool or whatever, depending on what you're going to use it for. But because I'm going to use mine as coasters and hot pads, I'm going to make mine out of cotton. We're going to be stitching today with our H-hook, which is a 5.0 millimeter crochet hook. You need a needle to weave in your ends, and of course, you're going to need a pair of scissors. All right, so let's make one of our 4-leaf clover squares. So since we're beginning with the center, which is our 4-leaf clover, we're going to begin with our green. We're going to start with our slip knot. And we're going to chain 5 chains. And we'll join this chain 5 into a circle. Now, if you would prefer to use a magic circle here, you certainly can. Now we're going to make the first row of petals for our clover. So we'll go in, pull up a loop, and chain 2. Now we're going to stitch 2 double crochets. 1 and 2. We're going to chain 2, and we're going to slip stitch in the circle. And chain 2. We have 1 clover petal made. All right, so let's do 2 double crochets. 1 and 2, and chain 2. And again, we'll slip stitch in that circle and chain 2. Now I am stitching over my tail of yarn, and that's so I can close up that hole when we finished. All right, 2 more double crochets. 1, 2, scoot that over. We got to fit one more set in there. Chain 2, slip stitch. Whoops, get back in there. Alrighty, slip stitch in the circle and chain 2. Alright, I want to move these around a little bit, so I'm going to make sure I can fit my last one in there. 2 double crochets and chain 2. And now we're going to slip stitch in that circle. Alright, and then we're going to end with a chain 3. And this is how it should look at this point. Now, before we do row 2, we want to turn this over and close that circle as much as possible. It doesn't have to be completely closed, but just closed up nice and neatly. Well, I changed needles, but we just need to close up the center and weave this in nice and securely so it doesn't come undone. All right, let's grab our scissors, cut that off. So now the back is all neatly weaved in, and I've clipped off that extra piece of yarn. And so on the front we have 4 petals. Chain 2, 2 double crochets, chain 2, and then slip stitch in the circle and repeat 3 more times for 4 petals. Then after we slip stitched, we chained 3. Okay, and so now what we're going to do is we're going to single crochet in that first of the 2 double crochets. We're going to chain 1 and then single crochet in that second double crochet, and then we're going to chain 3. 1, 2, 3. And now we're going to go to this slip stitch and stitch a slip stitch. And it might be kind of tight like that one. Chain 3, single crochet in the double crochet, chain 1 and single crochet in the next double crochet, and chain 3. 1, 2, 3. And again, slip stitch in that slip stitch, and again it's probably going to be just a little bit snug, and that's okay. 1, 2, 3. All right, and then we'll just repeat this on these last 2 petals of our 4-leaf clover. Single crochet, chain 1, and single crochet, chain 3. 1, 2, 3. Slip stitch in that slip stitch and chain 3. Single crochet in the double crochet, chain 1, and single crochet in the next double crochet and chain 3. Now we're going to single crochet in that last slip stitch, which is nice and snug. Whoops, lost my loop. Get back on there. All right. Sometimes working with some of the cotton yarns can be a little hard because they're a little bit stiff. All right, now at this point we're going to cut our green yarn. We're going to tie that off to the back, and we'll use our needle and go ahead and weave this in. To the back. And usually when you're doing a granny square style, you don't do that. But for how we're doing this one, we're going to go ahead and weave this green in to the back. And you'll see why when we do row 3. All right, let's make sure that's in there nice and snug. Clip that off. And there's our 4-leaf clover so far. Now for row 3, we're going to take our white yarn and we're going to join to any of the 4 corners of our clover. It doesn't matter. We're going to go in that chain 1 space between those 2 double crochets. And we'll chain 3, and this chain 3 counts as 1 double crochet. Now we're going to stitch 2 more double crochets in that chain 1 space. And we're going to chain 2 and then stitch 3 more double crochets in that chain 1 space. 1, 2, 3. Now that formed our first corner of our square. We're going to chain 2 and go over to the next chain 1 space that's in our next corner, or our next petal I should say, to form our corner. And we'll stitch 3 double crochets, chain 2, and 3 double crochets. 1, 2, and 3. So now we have 2 corners, and we'll repeat what we did here on these last 2 petals. So now I have 3 corners made, and we'll do the last corner. Again, 3 double crochets. Chain 2 and 3 double crochets. Alrighty, now we're going to chain 2, yarn out of there. Once we've chained 2, we're going to join to that chain 3 with a slip stitch. And now we're going to slip stitch in those next 2 double crochets, and then slip stitch in the chain 2 space. And I'm going to do a little chain 1 there so you can see how it looks. And I really like this effect because when you're doing your corners in those 4 petals, it gives it more of a clover effect than just 4 petals like a flower. All right, and so that's the way that row 3 will look. So now what we're going to do, we're going to pull that chain 1 out. I'm going to bring my loop up just a little. I do that sometimes so that it doesn't come undone when I'm changing colors. All right, so I'm going to cut off my white yarn and bring in my orange. And of course, you could use a rainbow yarn here and be really pretty. All right, so we're going to bring in our orange, snug everything down, get those tails out of the way. And in this first corner, we're going to stitch 2 single crochets, a chain 1, and 2 single crochets. All right, now in these next 3 double crochets, we're going to stitch 1 single crochet in each. That brings us to our chain 2 space, and we're going to stitch 2 single crochets in that chain 2 space. Then we have 3 double crochets, so we'll stitch a single crochet in each of those doubles. And that brings us to our next corner. So we'll stitch 2 single crochets, chain 1, and 2 single crochets. And then again, 1 single crochet in those 3 doubles, 2 single crochets in the chain 2 space, and 1 single crochet in those 3 double crochets. And then we'll be back in our corner. 2 single crochets, chain 1, and 2 single crochets. And we'll continue to repeat this the rest of the way on these 2 sides. So I repeated that on these last 2 sides, and I'm going to join to that first single crochet, and we're going to cut our yarn. Whoops. There we go. All right, now we'll just pull that loop to the back so we can tie off to the back. So we have a nice finish on the front. And I need to weave these ends in, and I'll do that in just a second. But one thing I do want to mention is if you're not happy with your square, say it's not as square as you would like it, you can block it. Put it on a blocking board, spritz it with a little bit of water, maybe set it on your dryer or just set them down, let them dry overnight. You don't need to soak them down, just get them a little bit dampish, and then you can let them sit, you know, after you've pinned them to your blocking board if you want them to be square. It makes it easier to line them up if they are nice and crisp, but they don't have to be. All right? So I'm going to take my needle, I'm going to go ahead and weave these ends in, and then I'm going to show you how to put them together. So now I have 4 squares plus these 4. And so you need to have 8 of our small squares in order to make the hot pad or pot holder. But again, you can make whatever you want with these. Put them together however you want. Make a table runner, the top of a washcloth or a washcloth itself, top of a towel, hats, bags, any decorations, and even just use these for coasters. All right? Okay, so let's put these 4 together so they're like this. So I've got 2 of the squares. We're going to put them together with the right sides facing out. We're going to go right up in that corner, grab our yarn, and I'm sticking with my orange. And now we're going to slip stitch them together. So we're going to go through the 2 loops on this side, the 2 loops on this side, and just slip stitch them together. Working all the way across. Just slip stitching them together. And I chose to go with a slip stitch because I didn't want quite as big of a bump on my row. And let me show you. It's not completely flat, but it is a little bit flatter than if you had gone with a single crochet. But I do want the row to be noticed. Okay? All right, so I'm going to continue across, stitching slip stitches and stitching 2 of my squares just on this one side. So I slip stitched across, stitching them together. So I have 2 together, and I'm going to go ahead and cut my yarn. And we'll tie that off. Okay? We do have 2 ends there, but don't tie them off just yet. Or don't weave them in just yet. And we're going to take the next 2 squares and do the same thing. Whoops, wrong piece of yarn there. We'll go in the corner again. Grab our yarn. And slip stitch these 2 squares together just like we did the other 2. And I'll slip these 2 together across the row so that I'll have 2 like this. So now we have 2 sets with 2. We're going to take these 2 and do the same thing. Now you don't want to take off your strands of yarn in the center just yet because you may need those to help close that center portion up, and I'll explain that to you in just a minute. Okay, so we're going to do just like we did. We're going to come in the corner. We're going to bring in our orange yarn or whatever color we're using for this row. and then we're going to slip stitch across both squares. So I'll slip stitch till I reach the center, and then I'll slip stitch across the second one, and make sure, just being careful that everything lines up, and make sure those tails of yarn are on the inside as you work. Now when you reach the center, you're going to want to put one stitch going through from front to back in that center, like that. This one's pulling a little, so I'm going to pull that string. There we go. And then you'll just go to that next stitch and keep going with your slip stitches. And don't worry if you have a little hole there. I'll show you how to fix that when we finish, okay? Let me move my hook here so you kind of see. We're just going straight across, just like we did over here, and we made one stitch to make sure that and each other was closed, and then we'll finish going across. So I slip stitched all the way across, and I'm going to go ahead and clip my yarn. All right, we'll weave this off, and we do have a few ends to weave in, but let's turn this over and look at the center. Now I want you to look, just make sure you don't have a hole here, because if you do, what you can do is just grab your needle and use one of your tails of yarn to close that hole up. Okay, so you can go in and just go across, trying to make sure that the color matches and the stitch matches, just like that. And then what I do, if I've had to close that up, that one I didn't this time, but sometimes when I make these I do, I pull on it a little bit and just give it a nice, what I call a stay knot. And then I go ahead and take my needle and weave that in. Now before I do the next row, I'm going to weave in all these ends from the four sides and the center so it looks nice and neat like this one. All right, so I'm going to grab this needle and get to weaving in. So both of my bigger squares now, consisting of 4 squares, is all tidied up. I've got all my ends woven in, and now I have 2 big squares that I want to put together. So again, we're going to take the 2 squares, put the backs together, and we're going to be stitching all the way around the squares. All right? And we're going to be doing single crochets. Now, you can go back to using a white, a green, or an orange, or whatever color that you want to. I'm going to go ahead and stick with my orange because I want it to look similar to the center here. Okay, and so you can join on any of the corners, whichever one you like the best. And I'm just going to go in that corner. You want to join at a corner because we're going to make a loop so we can hang it up once we get all the way around. And this time we're going to be stitching single crochets. So we've joined up here in the corner. We're going to be stitching the front and back together. And so we'll just go in that first stitch and the first stitch over here and stitch a single crochet. And now we're just going to single crochet all the way around all 4 sides of our pot holder or hot pad. All right, or whatever you're making. This would make a nice purse. You could put a bunch more squares to make it even bigger, depending on what you're making. It would make a nice table runner or even a tablecloth. They're just fun little 4-inch squares that we can make into whatever we want to. And of course, I'm going to make hot pads or pot holders with mine. So we're going to single crochet all the way around all 4 sides. And on our corners, we're going to single crochet, chain 1 and single crochet in that corner. And I'll show you that as soon as I get over to the first corner. So I've single crocheted across, stitching the front and back together. I'm in the first corner and I'm going to single crochet, chain 1 and single crochet in that chain 1 space there. And that just makes it move nice and smoothly around that corner. And then I'm just going to continue stitching single crochets, stitching the front and back still together, making sure that these line up together where we stitched. And then again, when I get to that next corner, I'll do the exact same thing. And we'll do this working around all 4 sides and 4 corners of our hot pad or pot holder. And then we'll join back over here to our first single crochet. I single crocheted all the way around, placing that single crochet, chain 1 single crochet in each of the corners, and I did that here and joined to the first single crochet. So now I have a nice thick pot holder. But also keep in mind we do have some holes in here, so this is not intended to grab something hot out of the oven. It's basically used to set on your counter like a trivet to protect your counter or your wood surfaces. All right, so once you've joined up here, we're going to chain 12. Six, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. And then we'll just join right back here. And tie off. Now we have a loop that we can hang it up so it can dry. I'm going to make that little stay knot that I like to make. I like to do a little stay knot and then weave in the end. And I think it just helps it get where it needs to go. All right, then I'll just grab my needle and weave that in, and my pot holder will be all finished and ready to be used. I think this would be a lot of fun to set on the table and maybe put a basket of rolls in it or cornbread. Or maybe just put a pot of soup on it. Use it to protect your wood surfaces and counters, or just for a decoration. Lots of things to do with our 4-leaf clover granny square. Wasn't that a lot of fun? And it's also really easy because you can make up a whole bunch of squares with like your leftovers and make it all mix and match with different colors, or make whatever you want with our 4-inch 4-leaf clover square. I loved making it, and I have this idea that I want to still use the 4-leaf clover, but maybe do the orange part in a rainbow variegated. Wouldn't that be pretty? What colors will you make? Looking forward to seeing them, and I'll see you next week for another edition of Friday Fun Day with Sara.